Well, Stuart, just to recap what we were just saying, finally we're here together in the flesh, and it's incredible. It's been absolutely remarkable to have this time with you in person. We've met just over a year ago, and I know my life has been radically changed since our paths come together, or radically enhanced in a lot of ways. And much of what I'm now experiencing in my life, I owe deep gratitude and respect to you for your level of support that you've extended to me on numerous levels, personally, professionally, everything. And having this time with you in person has been really, truly a gift, really, truly a gift. And one of the things that we keep sort of noticing and recognizing is that this wasn't just a coffee meeting. It wasn't just a few hours or a couple of days. We're just wrapping up actually a 3-week journey together. And there have been so many themes that have come up during this time, and that's what brings us together right now, is just to, as we're sort of closing this 3-week chapter, just having this hour or however long to just sit with everything that we've been experiencing in this 3-week window, reflect on it, and just have an open discussion about it.
It's a beautiful gift I think you're giving me, and really both of us, because of the potency or the intensity, and this really sacred in the sense of how it was, how the time was organized for us. And just to say a little more detail, yeah, that we can feel that thousands of years people have gathered in the way we gathered. Thousands of years, that's 20 years per generation, 5 generations per 100, 50 per 1,000 years. Yeah, this is 200 some generations of people have gathered the way we gathered. And it was certainly new to me, and inviting me into what you were aware of is where we're now coming out of. And it was so dramatic. I'm sitting here, and the quality of my visual consciousness is as if I had like blinkers on before most of my life. The degree of vividness of everything that I'm looking at and seeing you, which is a really good thing to be looking at, in case you're wondering out there. Yeah, it's just like it's what we talk about consciousness becoming more real. You know, the visual space right now is so beautifully vivid that I have to say something. I have to mention it.
It's so touching that you, just put words to what it is we're experiencing in this moment, and it really actually echoes the intention of what I feel is so important and why we even sit down right now and create this time in this container where we can actually attempt to give words to what we've just experienced, because it's truly a monumental time. And I think one of the things that actually is so resonant in both of our fields is really actually that acknowledgement that this really is the time of our lives, and to really restore our true nature, we have to remember these very simple pathways that are always never not available to us to connect. And actually, that's so easy in a lot of cases, is just to use our words, vocalize and express what is here right now. And it's so touching, it's so moving. Very easily, you could go on with your journey from here. I'm going to go on with my journey from here, and that would be absolutely perfect. and wonderful, and we'll always be so appreciative of this time. And when the next time comes around that we're together, we'll be appreciative of that time as well. But we have an opportunity here now to anchor this and to not let it pass us by as such.
Well, it's the most of a gift to me is, if I may say so, is you and Brian having met. I think in our history, that stream of, for you, of motherhood, of family creation, and this kind of thing that clicks on a woman or a man who's interested in such a thing at some point. I can't do this alone. You know, so many other things you can write a book or do your service to humanity. To some degree, you can tailor it to just yourself, or even the partnerships are not quite the same. And so for me to have been with you through the year in which that you had not yet met Brian. And so even in saying his name, you know, it's not your person or your partner, but the particular person. Then it starts to make, for me to be able to say, yeah, this vividness of life that can happen. That certainly I've been dedicated to helping many thousands of people, is to find that other, or if they have found the person that they click with, to be sure that it keeps blossoming in the right direction. Because distractions or cynicisms and doubts and fears, you know, can distract. But in our meeting now and conversation, imagine you can guess the joy that certainly I feel, and Christina as well, in seeing the two of you together. It's really almost like a fairy tale. But it's, the thing about it is that it's more real. Fairy tale is a way of saying it's too real, or not, it's too perfect and probably a fairy tale. No, in this case, it's the fact that you've met makes your reality come forward. And so when I look at you, the year in the past, it was with crossed fingers, maybe you could say, or uncertainty and a holding pattern about motherhood and all that your whole life is dedicated to, about whether this would happen for you. And it was like one of the great ironies. You're dedicating to helping moms and dads become families, and you're going to be a midwife, not the mother, for maybe your whole life. And that's a path that I'm familiar with, of being a helper of others in ways that you're doing something different than that much of the time, or haven't found a partner, because it's not all up to us. And so it's been however long, a couple of months, I think, that I've known, or maybe less than that, that I've known, that you've met Brian for a couple of months. And to see this, like, the plant gets the water and it blossoms. Before that, it's like a desert plant. You know, it can live and do well in the conditions of the arid, you know, but if you see desert spring, like, sometimes it's a short period of time, but it's like, it happens like overnight. Some cacti, they just blossom overnight. And first they're like a cactus, and suddenly they're like a floral garden. And the kind of flowers that pop out of some of these cacti are just mind-bogglingly beautiful, like sea anemone. You know, they're just all this activity coming out of them. So yeah, I'm anchoring, I guess you could say, my experience that I hope, yeah, you may listen to, for both of you, for your lives ahead. And I'm witnessing pretty close to the metaphoric birth of your couplehood. And it's like a fragrant flower that blesses everyone around. And you don't have to do anything. And your natural natures come out. Didn't know Brian before, to hear how he would describe. So to me, that fits into the beauty of the life that I'm watching happen. And also, yeah, things that I tried to share with people that romantic love is the nature's gift to us. It's the universe's gift. The meditative paths or yogas and all these spiritual practices that people use dedicate to the exclusion almost, perhaps, or the putting on the side their partnerhood or search for romantic love, or living it out. Or they know more about the meditative path than they do about saying how beautiful their partner is and how kind they are and how much you look up to each other. You know, that kind of language is very rare. Ordinary romantic languages, and people know all kinds of Sanskrit and Pali terminology for Buddhist states of consciousness.
I'd just like to pause you there, Stuart, because you're really just beginning to give a voice to something that I really feel is probably the most important conversation of our time. And to me, it actually begins to escort us into the heart of the issues that we see on our planet. And there's many different directions the conversation could go from here. And so I'll just try to frame a question that would really prompt you to actually give more of a voice to this, which is, we are living in a time where almost everything in our society is deviating us away from this pathway of love. And you pointed to it when you said, oh, wow, what I see here in you and Brian is just like a fairy tale. But that whole fairy tale thing is taken on this depiction of, oh, that's too good to be true, and or that's a trap, or, you know, all of these things. We know the story. And now, and this is, you know, this is a broad question, and so we'll try to keep it focused and maybe go down one avenue and then the other avenue would be what this whole era of trauma healing is also doing when it comes to keeping us from entering those deeper states of connection, romanticism, eros, and lifelong love, family creation, that now we're sort of spiraling in the trauma healing, and so much so that in a lot of cases, at least what I see in my generation, is that it's still keeping us from being able to access these deeper pathways of union. Can you give a voice to that and just speak to what you're seeing, and maybe even give some examples in your own personal practice over the last 40, 50 years of working with couples? Like, what are these issues? How are they presenting? What are the solutions? And how is this modern era of trauma paradigm actually keeping us from solving the problems that are current, and we all know what they are?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question, and the quick answer is, if we focus, if we have a sense of what the goal can be, and if it's as easy as saying, wouldn't it be great if teenagers started falling in love at around 16 or 18 or 20 or 25, you know, young adulthood, and that was the nature of life, and they became attuned to one another in a way that was completely whole and undisruptible because of the spellbinding enjoyment and natural unfolding of personality that happens when people say, I'm in love. So I think we all know what, or have heard of it at the very least, this thing called falling in love. And so really what I'm saying is that mood, that I think I can at least point to it, and you're in, you know, that is such a natural phenomenon that if Freud or the founder of psychotherapy, had been a poet, let's say, or let's make Rumi a reference that people may know a lot about, because he personalized the deity as the beloved in his poetries, constantly speaking of the beloved. And he did have actually a beloved. His teacher was considered to him to be his beloved. And I don't know much more about the nature of the actual relationship, but I extrapolate from his poetry this path that if Freud had been aware of it, or I'll make another reference, which is Walt Whitman, who wrote a tremendously beautiful poetry about the perfect male and female meeting one another, how the life and the whole of consciousness really just blossoms in that state. I Sing the Body Electric comes to mind as one of his poems, and so what I'm saying is, if we had a founder we'd be 100 years into what I picked up around the early mid-1970s, was to just invite therapy clients, as couples for sure, to just say whatever their problem was. I'd say, well, I come from strength. I'd like to help people by knowing their strengths and taking that strength and applying it to any problem. So I know you come in, you're already seeing lawyers, you're already ready to divorce each other. You have a history that justified that to you. Things are just not working. We tried this and this, and you somehow got my name, and that you're going to try one more thing. Not that every couple came to me like this was I able to help, but the good large percentage that I would say, yeah, to get to your problems first, I need to hear your strengths, and that just means, what do you love about this woman? What have you ever loved about her? And what have you ever loved about this man? And it could be 5 years, could be 30 years ago. And memory is so profound. But the almost daring, or devil may care daring, and on my behalf, of breaking a rule that fits into the trauma model that's popular in the last 5, 10, 15 years, 20 at the most, something, is to start with the problem. And it's so ingrained that to merely say, I'd like to start with strength, I'm setting the parameters. I'm not what they call meeting the couple where they're at, which is turmoil or almost hopelessness. So that, on my part, took a tremendous, not on my part, but to the eyes of the world, Stuart is like taking a huge leap into the bad place of not following where the client, meeting them where they're at. He's coming from some other place, which is, we've been all taught not to do that. So what I believed is this is where people are really at. Where people really are at is they want to be in love. And if we get distracted by a medical model, which is a shorthand way of talking about interests in healing even, or trauma, or how the two of you have bad communication problems, or abusive problems, or diagnostic issues of depression or narcissism. People utilize all these kinds of medical type psychiatric terms. So I think of them as signs of starvation. If you have scurvy, the old sailors would get crooked legs. I wouldn't measure how crooked your legs are. I'd give you some oranges and some lemons. Get this vitamin C in your body. I don't need a lot of explanation. Oh, how crooked is his leg, and how warped has his stuff really become? The analogy is 100% accurate, even though it's physical to emotional realm is a different realm. I still will want to share that with you, so that I want people fed. I want to start feeding them immediately. I want them to start experiencing the strength that, and I'll tell you the irony, but the strength is that, they're not just saying what they love about each other. That's one way of entering the dialogue, is asking that question. But it's really saying, what would you like to feed your partner that is the best that you could ever feed them? And that would be way description of how you love them, what you admire about them, how you're grateful for different things. And you may certainly have to, in my world where there's paying money to see, because you're about ready to break up or something, that's not forefront of your mind. So my choice to say, dig in your memory and start talking about that turns out to be revolutionary.
I mean, I just want to laser in on that for a second, because for those of you who are listening now and will listen in the future, this is obvious, but it's become very unobvious. We have sickness in the world, and all the supposed solutions, at least what we see in the mainstream and the conventional, are making us more sick. When we have a outbreak of some sort of virus or what have you, we aren't at all looking at lifestyle, exercise, diet, and all the actual solutions that are available. And somehow it's become really hard to see that this very same thing is being expressed in psychological analysis as well, and so-called trauma healing. We're still marinating in the problem. We're even feeding the problem. We're even giving more of the very thing that's created the problem in the first place, which is entertaining the pain body, which is really not at all what our original genesis is based on, which is love and connection and health and vitality. I mean, it's so easy to miss that, but it's so easy to see. When I came across your work and I read your book, Advanced Spiritual Intimacy, and I've been through it a few times, I need to go through it a few more times, and some of your articles, all of these things will be in the show notes. But there was something that just clicked. It was like, of course, absolutely. This is the direction that we've always never not needed to go. But to be honest, before speaking with you about it, I felt I was having the conversation alone. I hadn't actually spoken to anyone that we could really talk the way that you and I can, and share and resonate and say, oh yes, absolutely. And I've spoken to many different kinds of therapists and people that are doing working with amazing breakthrough psychotherapeutic modalities. I believe they're helpful. They've been very helpful for me as well. But there's this perception that if we do go to the strength right away, or if you're crying in pain, and I empathize, if you will, with the pain, rather than say, oh, wow, look at what I see is immense strength in you right now, to be so open with me as someone who doesn't even really know you that well. Mm-hmm. If I would focus on that, the way that this has often come up in conversation, when I suggest this possible avenue that we could take as therapists, this word bypassing comes up. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, there you're just bypassing the problem. And I see that as a big spiritual bypass or what have you. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. I know the guy that invented the term bypass. And I would say not very many people who know the word know John Wellwood. And so that is a common phenomenon. Not very many people alive, no one probably knew Freud, still alive, who can tell us what the guy really was like, and if he farted or whatever else he did that was human. And so John and I had a talk about bypass. And this is just ordinary logic, is if you create a term like bypass, it's like if you have a sink, if you have a hot water, you really can only say it's hot if you have a cold water tap as well. And so if you have the word bypass, we have to wonder if there's such a thing as to surpass. If there's such a thing as skipping over issues, which is not 100% impossible. We're not born 100% mature. So some areas we get good at in life, and others we're less skillful at, and some things we are fumbling. And so, but I frame it as more from learning theory than you're bypassing issues, as if there's almost a moral condemnation to, oh, you're skipping over something, you're trying to find a shortcut. And that has a history to it, which mainly was a psychedelic history, that people in the 60s who were therapists were meeting people who had bad trips, and they were trying to only have good trips. And so they made up, they started looking at the bad trip to try to analyze how it could, what information could be there. And so John, I said to John, because my clinic that I inherited was the first spiritual emergence clinic in America, meaning that people who were so-called awakening needed help with that awakening. The mythology that if you awaken, it's only easy is wrong. Buddha and certainly Christ said, "Why hast thou forsaken me?" And he was conveyed to us as the Son of God. And yet on the cross, and as the man God or human God, we have that particular sign of a doubt, a moment of doubt and fear and trembling. Maybe I made a mistake. Why am I up here? So we know that it's not that simple to become more awake and higher the possibilities, such as forgiving the people who are trying to kill you, because you see that if they knew better, they wouldn't do it. And that's what you focus on. You don't say, to hell with you, get me the hell off of this thing. If that's what you can say that, if you want to live a little bit longer. But in his choice, he was to take this very hard path, staying 100% true to the goodness of people around, no matter what they were doing. So that was surpass. He was surpassing ordinary level of functioning at an extreme level. But in ordinary daily life, we also have moments where we can surpass. And what the therapist can do is mentor the tiniest increment of one's, and I'll give an example, of when you slightly surpass. Like I can choose to say, the attention you are giving me now is almost making me cry. I'm like looking at a granddaughter that I didn't ever have at this stage of my life. You come out of, I don't know where, Zoom calls, and now I'm seeing your life blossoming. I see your eyes are filling with, I don't know, the tears of love and joy, and they're getting more and more magical the longer I look, until you start now looking like rose flowers. And now you're smiling, and it's just like endless. Now you're really kind of, your cells are starting to like pink out, and now you're really looking like, I don't know, raspberries, where they have all the little tiny sweetnesses on them in their cluster. And now you're smiling like that, and you're smiling again. You see, I could talk like this for hours. Now you're ageless, and I can't tell if you're 11 or 25. Your being is in the pulse of the living emergence of the life of your life, and I'm just radiating upon you the impact that you have on me. I'm not answering your questions right now. I took that leap that I mentioned before about towards strength, let's call it. And it's a type of courage, but it turns out not to take much courage at all. But it does take a little fluency with your language and the ability to see what I was putting into words, and then have the courage, I guess, or unembarrassment or non-shyness. These are natural limitations that we can surpass. And they turn out to not be related to trauma. And if I thought of myself as traumatized, women have really caused me a lot of problems. And we started talking about that. My energy would drain away so quickly. Well, what about when you were 30 years old? How was it going? And when you were 18, I'd be completely thrown. And if your eyes start filling with tears, and I did this experiment once, I had a video it wasn't quite as ideal of a situation as we're in. And the tears came to one partner. I turned off the video and I asked the class, what do you think is going on? Oh, you brought up some past trauma. And it's now been triggered. And we're seeing it in her eyes. And I would go around the room, about 10 or 12 students. They pretty much all agreed. I would say they all agreed, just different ways of phrasing it, that yeah, what was going to next be happening would be the revelation of some trauma that got triggered. Instead, what the client then said was how much she loved her husband. And of course it made sense, because that's what I had asked. I said, well, what do you love about this guy? Then I had the video on their faces. You could see her eyes filling up. And I stopped it for my students. And they said, oh, yeah, she must have been triggered. And then I played it. And even after I said, now, logically, her tears could be thought of as about my question, which is, what do you love about your husband? Not a psychoanalytic, associative realm. That just has about her father or her childhood or something. It could logically be thought as an actual response, like, are you comfortable where you're sitting? Are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't say, why are you treating me like I remember my father treated me when I was 4 years old. Stuff like that. So bypass is a way of preventing surpass from happening. That's the way I'm rephrasing what you said. When people start surpassing their current level of functioning, and what do I mean by that? The ability to first say, your eyes are filling with tears, or whatever I first said, what a joy it was to be here seeing you. My memory's not catching all that I early on said. And then I just kept talking more about how you kept blossoming after everything I said. That is a skill called tracking the unfolding surpassing of the person who you're sitting in front of. Tracking the unfolding, you have to be watching the surpassing happening and not doing a psychoanalytic U-turn into some other dimension, as if that's where the real work happens. That's where the real old unpleasantness can always be talked about, and later on can be. But it's a completely different story when you have all of the strengths about you. I don't want to get too many threads going at the same time, but just a little bit, so that we know that it's not like there's no room for those kinds of conversations that the word bypass tries to refer to. But I like to really reveal what I just did, what surpass starts to look like. And because it's something that is living in the moment and outgrowing itself, that I have to overcome every moment of being shy. Like, oh, can I really say that? Like, her cells are blossoming? Is that going to sound silly? So I have to put all of that aside and resort to, if I need to, authorities like Rumi or E. E. Cummings. E. Cummings' poetry blows your mind. I wish I could remember his poem about the tiny hands of opening and the heart flowering and all these sort of things. One of his great poems. But you see, he had the courage to try to put into words that moment-to-moment flowering of the human heart. And I think the last 100 years, millions of trained therapists could have been expert in people like E. E. Cummings or Walt Whitman or Rumi and the Romantic poets who were intoxicated and were really aware. And that could branch out into Eastern culture, what we call bhakti, or the path of enlightenment, which is 100% what I'm talking about, is the path of enlightenment of, I would bow to you at this moment. I wouldn't just use words. I would do this, because this is you. Even the dog started barking, you know. And so you start to feel so many gestures of possibility when I think of the word devotion, because we can look up to another person. And I've definitely done this as a clinician, where people who are in a almost wavering between an enlightening state and what you could kind of call almost a psychotic state. Their reality is so expanded, but also frightening. This is where the surpass issue or concept and bypass issue was, where John was aiming at. People who are awakening and something problematic needed to be discussed for their maturation. You don't want to bypass these issues. I found that I wanted to help them continue to surpass themselves. And I would say to some, not every single client, come in and they're maybe they've taken too many psychedelics. Maybe they've been on meditation retreats and it really worked. And they're in an elevated state. They feel like they love everyone, but maybe they have to give up everything. Or they feel that they see the darkness of the world in a way that they don't know if they can live with it anymore. You know, and so trying to help them with this broadened state of consciousness, I would say, you know, this is what, you know, we don't use this word in Western religions about each other. Eastern, in India, they use it more easily. Saint. You're experiencing yourself becoming like a saint is. You know, for example, it's typical polite gesture to say, when we shake hands with another person, say, how you doing? In India, they go, namaste. I bow to the divine within you. And we now know it because yoga is everywhere. People know namaste. But then you go, well, I never did. I bow to the divine within you, to my mother to me, my father, my friends, namaste. There's a total absence of a social protocol that's just part of daily life, like shaking a person's hand. How you doing? Oh, well, let me introduce you to my friend, you know, Victoria. And we would just shake hands, there'd be nothing to it, right? Oh, good to meet you, right? But not this. But you go to India, the people do this all the time. So we start to see surpass, getting back to your point. If we really got further into this than just the first moment, the reminder of that we can evoke awe and respect in each other. And a tiny therapy story, not just a little glimpse. One of the worst couple cases I'd ever had, guy gotten out of jail for domestic violence, a charge filed by his wife and family. That's how bad things were. That 20-year marriage, and it was not that good, not just at the end, but many, many, many times. And so they already seen their separate divorce lawyers. First thing that I did of interest was, since the couple was from an Asian culture, the pathway from the door to my office to the sofa where the couple sit, I had strewn rose petals all the way, because I wanted them to feel that I was respecting them as a married couple way before their, and that would be the context in which we would address their quite significant issues. And whatever, typical, let's just call it anger issues, you know. And yet at the end of every session, no matter how, because they weren't doing that well, I'll just tell you, you know, the method is not like magic, but it creates a context where people have a direction where we're headed right from the very beginning. You know, I'm saying where we're headed here is to make you guys have unbreakable, unconditional love. You deserve it, and all that sort of thing. And at the end of every session, no matter how hot and angry things came, we would all go namaste. And I would say, yeah, we all know how deep this is in your culture. And we, in the West, we're blown away by your culture. So I would say things like that. Really? Our culture? You're saying things like, every opportunity I could have would be to show, not, oh, what about this issue? Or what about that? Or how is this about that? It was always to show people that the client is way more than they ever thought they were, besides probably most any other therapist would be willing to say. And on occasion, when a single client who was really in a very difficult state, I would say, this state in India, you'd be surrounded with a village, they'd be aware of what's going on. And we have stories of saints. Meher Baba, if you want to ever look up his story, he didn't eat for like 6 months after he was awakening. People feared for his life on the one hand, but on the other hand, they knew he was becoming a saint, which he became. And so I say, that story, and I say, you're not just my client coming for help, and I'm not taking notes and looking at your bypass issues. First thing I want you to receive from me is what the Indian surrounding would be of you right now. This. Mm-hmm. And the challenge would be, what the heck is this guy doing? Mm-hmm. Who is this therapist? What's going on? Oh yeah, I've heard of him. So at least I can try to go on that. But I would try to prepare. But I would still say, this is what begins to stabilize you, is to help you surpass yourself. And yes, what you need a lot of mentoring. And yes, you need to, as doubts may come up, how could I do this given my childhood? You can say, it's always aiming forward though. Mm-hmm. There is a way how, rather than kind of a sarcastic, how could I be doing this? Mm-hmm. Or even really like, the too good to be true, this can't possibly be happening to me. Look how fucked up my life has been. How could this be? I'm saying, in fact, it is happening. So it's this ear with a high level non-cynicism or high level ideal romanticism, where we re-elevate the word romanticism to where it used to be before, if I can be a little intellectually oriented, the history in Western civilization, the age of reason, with Kantian philosophy, where he was trying to clarify what was reasonable to know through knowledge, and that became the basis of modern science, in a way, is how to be objective and be honest with what we can know and see. But poetry is very different. Poetry is the use of language is to glorify, not and thereby be accurate, but to a world that understands that however we look, it turns out to be Einsteinian in this sense, how we look has an effect on what we see to an untellable degree of subtlety. If you are a Jungian therapist, you're going to start to be seen that way and act that way. They say Jungian clients have Jungian dreams and Freudian clients have Freudian dreams. That's a joke. It's been around for a long time. So if I'm seeing what and putting into words what I saw, that's what a midwifing into existence. And within that context, and we're all very clear, this is the direction of it all. This never comes up. In fact, 10 steps below this never come up in any training that I've been on the boards of directors of 2 different clinical training graduate schools. There's no courses on the phenomenology, we would call it, of love, or the phenomenology of the human face, blushing, the 5 different shades of blush, the pink blush where the eyes start to soften, the sudden change in the color eyes where they well up and they glisten over, and the person looks like ageless. Their facial structure may change, and you see their beauty from a completely different angle. You feel their heart open. You feel it's about you, that you're looking at them, because they're certainly looking at you. And then you have to let that in, that they're happy about seeing me or you. And that is another dimension. Mm-hmm. That my face is having these changes. Mm-hmm. And so that's a very different face than the analyst taking notes, or talking about trauma history. Mm-hmm. And you will reveal what we call a narrative. It starts to require that it be coherent. You can't say, but I had a really great time with my mom. Now we're skipping, we're bypassing. You're escaping the work. And that's another thing. Right. This Puritanism, that the path is like the Puritans taught us, spare the rod and spoil the child. I hang like a spider over the jaws of hell. That was Jonathan Edwards one of the most famous sermons of the in America of the, I guess it was the 1800s, the 19th century. You know, God hangs us over like an insect over the jaws of hell. If he should not think about us for 1 second, we would drop into the sulfurous depths and burn and, you know, sizzle. You know, we should be grateful and be so vigilant in his good will for us, you know, because Christ died for us. Do you get that? And you look at how you're living, you know, that type of fire and brimstone. It got modified and shifted into, tell me about your trauma. And if you stray, we're going to call you kind of like a bypasser,
Right.
kind of like you're a wimp, kind of like you don't really want to work. You just want to play fun and games, you know. So they ridicule the outcome, the goal. They have no capacity to understand that even when you get to that beginning goal of the radiant person, if you don't know how to do 20 more steps, if you don't know how to say and see 20 more new things, it will start to come to a close, because language is that powerful. Yeah, if you talk about the trauma and you've mapped out 100 ways in the polyvagal nerve and the muscle stores up every trauma you've ever heard, people are going to believe that. SHI blank blank. They're just going to believe it. And then everybody's going to be like that, you know? Like Jonathan Edwards used to say, people laugh when you read Jonathan Edwards, A Sinner Before an Angry God. It's a classic of American literature because it was so well written. But what he was saying, nobody this today would, I shouldn't say nobody, there's, you know, the liberal mind would say, oh, that would be horrible. But it's only a transmuted into the language of, tell me about this trauma and that trauma. And what's given is an empathy. And I'll just land for this moment, is just to say, empathy is very important, but a steady diet of it requires that the client be something that needs mainly empathy. For example, what about admiration?
Right.
And admiration, it turns out, likewise, not only the face and the body language of the blossoming, not like, oh, you're sitting with your legs crossed. You know what every Freudian is taught? You're afraid of something. Let's talk about that. Why are your legs crossed, Victoria? Why do your fingers like this just over your lap? You know, the erotic misuse of the beauty of the human body is hard to stomach, and thank God a lot of it is over. But it just got replaced with, oh, what trauma is in your fingers, or are you trying to hold on to? And you're sort of like holding on to the chair in some strange way. And that thing you have over you, is that like to protect you from the world, you know? So you can go on, oh, and the pigtails, you know, you've got yourself like, what are you trying to do? You know, you can endlessly make suspect. And suddenly now we're in that world. That's the power of language.
Right.
Heidegger, just to bring in some people of weight, Wittgenstein, Willard Van Orman Quine, very powerful experts in the realm of linguistic theory, all tried to convey that language is not just something that, oh, describes, this is a kind of bluish color, you know, and sunlight. It's constructing a reality. Because I could have chosen to just continue talking about the softness that suddenly happens on your face when I start to connect with you. Yeah, and wordless, that's another worthy thing to say. That was, what, 10 or 15 seconds, but it was wordless. And the realm of intimacy or blossoming that happens when you don't name every single little thing. You go, wow, maybe the wordless extended duration, which also takes a kind of comfort or fluency. And you start seeing, wow, that was, you could say, 6 months or 5 years of therapy that just happened in those 15 or 20 seconds. If you follow the goal that I'm sharing about, the goal that people blossom as these beautiful beings, and then help them meet up with other people or in their own family, because you can do this too. It's not just couples. Yeah, I would have families that were not doing that well, like the couple that I described. They were not doing that well, and we didn't. We only made a certain degree of progress. It was 3 or 4 months, not to get into too much detail. But when that breakthrough happened, that was one of the worst, because he'd been in jail for 3 days.
So I just want to intervene here a little bit, because I think what I'm really hearing as you're talking, and what I hear and what's alive in me right now as you're sharing all of this, is this notion of reverence. And I know when I am working with mothers and fathers and multiple people that I'm working with in different dynamics for different reasons, I often find myself in awe of the story that they're sharing. And really, I think one of the things that is lost is this art of revering one another. Like, as a human being, when I hear someone's story, whether it's what they've experienced now or in the past or what, I'm often finding myself in awe of what it is that they're sharing, and really revering that this that's being shared is part of something that, number one, I know nothing about, and two, it's part of a greater unfoldment, and the potentiality that is there, that if someone is inside of what they're perceiving as a struggle or a challenge, then growth must be what's taking place. With the other thing that really resonates is this word surpass. I would say that the main thing that really guides my stewardship of luminous birth is my attunement and felt connection to the consciousness that's coming onto the planet now, which I believe is unlocking in all of us always, but more specifically the souls that are coming to Earth now. And it seems so absolutely clear to me that if we cultivate through remembering our original nature, which is all of these things that you're describing, our shared unified divinity, if you will, and our natural state of connection, communication, all of these things are natural. They're not at all developmental. We learn other things because of all these systems that are in place and that have come in. But that our children are going to far surpass what they're coming to do. And that's a pathway of potentiality. That's not a, well, what if they're like this, or what if they're like that? That's a sitting back and going, wow, look at this being that's here before me, and this curiosity of who they are, rather than making a presumption. Or I really feel that empathy and projection are often one and the same, and I often am unsure if they're even separate, and yeah, there can be really high levels of empathy taking place, where I can have someone sharing what is their struggle right now, and I can go, wow, I can see where this is leading, and that's magnificent. What a incredibly powerful journey you are on. Though when it comes to welcoming new life on Earth, I really feel that if we can remember, and then we can really, really allow the beauty and the genius and the absolute mastery of the human being to really fully emerge. And we don't even know what that is yet. That's a mystery. So we have to be open to that. Just the same way that you and I, a few seconds ago, in that little 15 seconds, had like no idea where that was going to lead us. we were in the mystery in that moment. I didn't know how I was going to feel coming out of that. And, you know, and so, yeah, the surpassing, the willingness to be changed really, really feels like something so, so important. So this leads us to another little area where our works come together, which is preconception. We were just at the Birthing an Ancient Future Global Hybrid Symposium in Amsterdam, among the many amazing things that we've been able to experience together while you're here. But this was a gathering of therapists and amazing pioneers in some of these fields that we're referring to. And there, it was asked to me on a number of occasions, oh, you're a therapist, are you? I guess. But I find my response to that question often being, oh, actually, well, my work is really in the realm of preventing therapy. So it really actually puts all of us out of work. And it's interesting because that's actually the truth. I don't believe that our children are going to need to spend all the time and money and energy of their lives trying to figure out who they are and why they came, and try to get back to these very basics, which are connection and fulfillment in the everyday, mundane moment here and now. And so, yeah, with preconception and intimacy, this capacity to feel the quality of the relationship, all of these things. I mean, this conversation could go on and on, but if you would feel so inclined to give a voice to what really is our potential when it comes to harnessing the power of the preconception time.
Beautiful, beautiful question. And yeah, in the bigger picture, rarely asked, certainly in the therapy world, and certainly asked in this kind of beautiful reverential way. You know, it's not an Oedipal issue, which is extremely crazy sounding, but so fertility is the quick answer. Is what preconception is, for my contribution to try to help us all, is to reinfuse a very broadened understanding and appreciation for what the word fertility means. And we can talk about same-sex couples in a special kind of a way, but for heterosexual couples where the fertility is makes it possible for conception to occur, to be able to be very comfortable, which you know only too well. You and Brian only know completely the difference that it makes. Yeah, most people, and certainly in America, if they meet, they need a lot of rehab to get okay with the idea that if they're falling in love, that it would also be like hand in glove to want to make babies together, instead of, well, how about maybe we'll date for a while, like 5 years, and how about maybe after 2 or 3 we might move in together, but marriage, that's for old people or something, you know, that you know, it's an institution. It's not really an expression of love. You know, we can do without marriage. And children, well, that will get in the way of our lives, you know. So there's plenty of highly developed memes of how to live as a spiritual seeker that is devoid of fertility. And with things like the pill and abortion available and basically legal, many places of the world, the sexuality can take place, what I call defertilized. That's what it is. It's sex defertilized. It's been defertilized roughly since the early mid-70s.
Wow. That that notion. how that's even possible, but it's
Yeah,
totally what
totally what
happened.
happened.
The defertilization of sex.
Yeah, totally defertilized. Not that it was all, you know, there was
Wow,
always a type of sex that, and I
it's
can get to that,
absolutely
because I'll just
happened.
quickly, say, if you really know what the sacred sexualities were about, the fertility cults of the pagans, so-called pagan fertility cults, the first religions, and Tantra of India, it's not the Tantra that's anywhere out there in the popular marketplace of those kind of courses. It's all about fertility worship. So it's a little theoretical right now, but let me bring it to the core. Firstly, you and Brian, you feel it as an incredible joy. And yeah, bring tears of awe. And so now you look at him as this being that is half of the possibility of new humans that his God has made in his body. And likewise, he sees you as the bearer and the other, the ova, you know, the language isn't very romantic, but, you know, you start to feel we're way more than we think we are, just in the basis of fertility. We are the product of hundreds of greats back in time, to a point in time that we can't even conceive of, because who conceived the one that wasn't conceived? Or is it just an endless sequence back? The mind boggles at concepts of like infinity or end or beginninglessness. But we do know that even in a gay relationship, somebody's got to get a piece of sperm or an ovum somewhere else if you're going to make life. You can then same-sex parenting, but somewhere along the line you have to get those two things together, even in a test tube if you were to do it. You know, so not to get too dry about it, but just to prove that point, to bring it back into the real world, yeah, you start to feel, and forward. You say you want to be a mom, you want to have a family, you are already making the potential to be grandparents. People say, oh, I don't know if I could be a parent. Well, it's not just that. It's the possibility of becoming a grandparent, because it's highly possible, particularly in the world you're describing, that our children will grow up in a world where romantic love is a piece of cake. All the love songs of all the rock and roll and all the ballads, you know, the first time ever I saw your face, I thought I felt the earth move under my feet. Felt like a bird in the palm of my hand, you know. These incredible love songs, you know, fools, how does it go? Fools say, I don't rush in. I forget my favorite song. Wise men say, only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in love with you. That is the nature of reality. It's not a rock song, you know. And if it could have been guided by therapists, eventually, yeah, certainly in the heterosexual context, you start to feel, let the fertility back in. And that's a kind of a Rubicon or a next step. That's nature. Darwin based his whole theory of evolution on the ability for that next step to occur, because that perpetuates the gene pool, so-called, you know, and the others don't continue. And that's called evolution. That which continues is based on the two that match up, carry on. So it's a monumental event, as you are feeling, as you talk about it. It's monumental. Yeah, life gets to continue. Your grandparents and your parents, your great, they're all up there somewhere going, yes, if they don't, then nothing will happen. But if they do, then all of this that's been, and it spreads out. Because if you have 2 parents, 4 grand, 8 great grand, 16 great, 32, 64, 128, you know, goes on until you get into the millions. And they're all related to us. And we're it for them. We're the it now of millions of ancestors. I don't know if it's billion, it might be overstating. I do the math properly. But eventually you could say God or something, or God goddess, you know, the great source of the flowers and everything else around us, you know. And for us, we're the flower of the human variety. So fertility has to be deeply infused into romantic love and into human nature, and the channels of rapport, like the word intercourse. Intercourse is used to describe conversation, verbal intercourse, and sexual intercourse is that's like where sex takes place, but in a certain kind and in a certain way that it's supposed to liberate you and take you out of the years of repression. This is, if you read Michel Foucault, he's one of the great analysts of the history of this concept and called sexuality. And he didn't say, well, they say they're liberated, but every product advertises itself as the best. This is the best soap you can ever buy. This is the best version of human life you will ever know, called unrepress your sexuality with sex. But in order to really do this, you have to have contraceptives that are effective. You can't talk like this unless you want women to be pregnant every 9 to 12 or 16 or a certain number of months. And or just as a slight introduction, because it's such a big topic, that if you fully understand the maturity of something like Kundalini yoga, or Tumo in the Tibetan tradition, or Shekinah in the Hasidic tradition, Holy Ghost even in the Christian tradition, but not very well articulated, you start to have puberties. What? With a plural? There's no such thing. There's a puberty. There's not another puberty. You look at dictionary, there's no plural, but that's a problem of the English language. Kundalini awakening is a spinal puberty. And what it leads to is capacities for lovemaking, like that are GP rated. That you have to disassemble all kinds of codes that are only came about because of this very narrow, that was taken as the whole, which is a big problem. It's like the flat Earth map. This isn't the map of the planet. It's this big. It's like a disc, and then people start sailing and they come around over the other side. That can't be possible, and then all the map makers are having to make globes. And they still don't know how to do it. There's something trying to figure this thing out. That's what we call sexuality, is we're on not just a flat Earth, it's like a postage stamp area of this huge space. And it's completely overdone by now, until we're having surgical transformations of people. And yeah, the defertilization is completely a part of life. And so for me to go from what you asked about, where we are now, I tried to introduce it first. Yeah, there's this tremendous interactivity of all kinds of fertilities. You and Brian are contemporaries in age. As I said about a week ago, I said, it came to me, I thought, oh, my father figure or something. I'm a grandfather figure. Well, I feel so charmed. Look at you. Look, everybody should look. Look at her. See how she is? Everybody needs to have a granddaughter, or be a grandfather or a grandmother, and then before that, different other, or uncle. Sometimes people will say, oh, I'm your uncle. And in some cultures, being an uncle is almost like another father or auntie. They call all the women in your family, or friends even, neighbors, auntie, because everybody's what they call kinship. You're born into a web, which is obviously the case. We're born into a community that already existed. And as soon as you go to school, there's teachers everywhere. It's a network of helpers and nurses and doctors and the milkman, all these different things. We're born into this network, and everybody's doing their part to keep the whole communal organism of individuals alive. And the anthropologists call that kinship. And no one in these Aboriginal cultures, when you ask them, can they live outside of their tribe, that doesn't even seem like a concept. It's like, can a fish live outside of water? You are in the water of kinship. What is that? Fertility. And the fertility has permutations. Yes, there's the possible conceiving couple, which you were mainly focusing on. But when you have an eros that's been liberated, it's a funny way to put it, you liberate eros from sexuality, or I should say defertilize sexuality. Let's liberate the eros. from that tiny, very problematic, it's causing more and more problems. Women are objectified. Men think that women are only what they look like, not the power that's within them. And women thought that their power was only limited to their home, ability to be in the home. But then they went the other extreme. They don't want anything to do with that kind of power, so they can have a real life in the world. The pendulum is, and now it starts to wobble. It's more towards the middle. That we're have this tremendous fertility, and when you start to feel it, I believe, and I wrote about this in the most recent book that I got published in, called 30 Years of Gender Reconciliation, in which I think a lot of harassment and all those kinds of really troubling issues, they go away, because when men and women feel the fertility within one another, there is a natural respect. If you start taking that away, you get typical pornography. You get just the act and even the ejaculating, which they include in the porno flicks. There's no fertility to it whatsoever. It's just the thing, and it's like burning $1,000 bills to see the color of the flame. You don't know what the value is,
Right.
And this is way more than currency. This is the value of life itself.
Right.
So you start to realize, oh yeah, it's very entertaining, and there's trillions of views of that, and people are kind of want either more, or they're addicted to it, or even the great champions of it are going, I don't know. The most popular TED Talk some decades ago was about critiquing pornography by liberals. So they were getting sick of something's missing. And fertility, and it takes I'm just introducing a little bit, expanding upon what happens when you introduce fertility. It's not just the first thing that you have ovulation, and I have men have sperm production, and we're fertile, and conceptions can happen. It's way bigger than that, because every cell is fertile too. Mitosis happens 4.8 million times per second. That's fertility, not just meiosis, which is the creating of ovum and sperm, that kind of fertility. So you start feeling every cell of your body is reproducing 4.8 million times, not every, but 4.8 million cells, reproductions are happening every second. It's mind-boggling. And if you even fantasize a millionth of that, 4.8 per second or something, or 100,000th of 480 or something, you start to tingle, because it's like your cells feasibly or reasonably are making love with each other. They're going like this, growing, and then they divide, pulsing, dividing, and that's called life. Yet none of the so-called body therapists, somatic therapists, yoga teachers that deal with the body know enough either about yoga, which is all about retas, urdhva retas, meaning the blossoming of the seed. Urdhva means the up blossoming, like when you plant a seed. Urdhva, it blossoms like this. The roots go down. Yoga is the way the human body moves when it's blossoming, and you see it in Tai Chi. They do it in slightly different ways, and there's rocking as this unfolding happens. And so you start to get a new realm of eros that allows intercourse to be conscious and enterable for the, and then the sensations of that type of intimacy, you feel like you're engaging in a partnership with the universe. Bringing in, you could say, a new being, you could say, if you reincarnation, if you want to go in that direction, and it's a big deal, because you're going to be a 3 or maybe a 4 if you have twins, right? That kind of a thing. And you feel like, you're way surpassing. And so now instead of marriage being a fearsome thing, and it probably won't work, and now we got 3 generations. So probability, generates more of the same, garbage in, garbage out. That's statistics, So if you have that, it is likely. So we have 3 or 4 generations that have been programmed to have a lot of fear about marriage and making families. And the world's such a bad place. Is it worse than the bubonic plague era, when like 2/3 of Europe perished? I don't know. I doubt it. Now we're 400 years beyond that. It's okay. It's going to be challenging all along. But in any event, what we're really getting at is this enhanced fertility. You start to feel, yeah, there's a destiny, there's a partnering, there's the finding, there's the magic of perpetuating lineage, there's all the simplicities of playful crawling around with a little baby on the floor, reliving kind of ourselves, our own infancy, and the magic of it, and seeing all of that happen, and learning how to introduce the world, to some little being, and all the things, that matures us. We should be clamoring at the gates to start. I'm not saying get married at 16, but I'm metaphorically saying that's how we should feel.
Mm-hmm.
We should feel between 16 and 25, we can't wait to do this thing. Mm-hmm. Why? And when I say we, or I can't wait, it should be a transpersonal I, which means I as the member of life forms. Mm-hmm. Like spring can't wait to come out of the ground. In the winter, the sun's coming out and the snow's melting. It's not saying, I don't think I want to go do this. You can feel spring wants, I'm personifying a little bit poetically, it wants to be spring. And you see the little crocus, the first flower, and the snow is running. It kind of wants to make its appearance. And then as it unfolds towards summer, things start like where we are. It just keeps wanting to keep being prolific and blossom and grow and wherever it possibly can. That is the I that is human nature. What got lost, mainly, there's many additional, but I'll just pick the core, the pill. Pill was, this will change women forever. It'll give you freedom. All you have to do is block your fertility. That's all. Just block your fertility. Take the pill, block your fertility. Done. Now you can have a career because you can have sex and not get, what. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have all of that. And just to go back, this is way beyond what we can cover in a short talk, but the fleshing out of the kinds of eros that allow incredible fulfillment, I call coentheogenesis. The kisses, for example, but many become saturated with brain chemistries that are like LSD, that are like what people experience when they take psilocybin. Mm-hmm. Because the brain chemistry is there. But the puberty of these centers, besides after the teen puberty, these entheogenic hormones start being secretable. That's why I talk like this. I've been doing this a long time.
We are going to do a part 2 where we
go into that.
We actually just talk about coentheogenesis because that's
too big of a
the
topic.
Next level.
But just enough
and not the next level, that's just the natural continuation
it's
of
continuation
this whole
of
thing.
It's just enough to say that allows us to have a bigger space for fertility without fear of making like hundreds of babies or something like that.
Yes.
Because there's other ways. That's all I'm really getting
at. Wow. I just want to take a moment here. Like for everybody that will ever listen to this conversation, may you feel the profundity. May we all, and even you and I, feel the profundity of what it is that's being discussed here right now. That this eloquent poetry that you are transmitting around human nature and this whole notion around defertilization of sex, in all the ways that this is also representing. We have now the defertilization of tantra, the defertilization of all of it, actually. We're coming back into our original primal nature, the very thing that is inherent in every single one of our cells, and remembering the basics around revering that. And I really want to, I actually want to just lift a prayer right now in this moment, that memory, because it is memory, just reawakens in all of our cells for all the generations that ever come. And that as I now prepare my body as a home for my children, I do so with the awareness that my grandchildren and great grandchildren are also taking up residence in my womb. And so in this moment and in the next one and in the next one, we all, whether we are creating children or whatever it is that we are using our fertile life force energy to create in this world, we can ask ourselves, what is the story that we are interested in writing? And that is the potential, the potency of this time, of this moment. I really would love to share a personal experience that I had recently that I feel can really actually give a voice and a living example of everything that you've just shared. Because this does bring us home to relationship and the union of two, and brings us home to maybe I can't do this all on my own. Maybe, just maybe, who would have thought? It was never designed to be like that. Now we've been through 60, 70 years of heroic independence as women, and we know what the aftermath and repercussions of that is, and we could talk about that. But what I would like to do is just share my own personal lived experience, which I am referring to actually as a revelation. Actually, through this experience, discovered what the true meaning of the word revelation is. And I also believe that the work that you've been facilitating for couples over these past 50 years has actually been reintroducing the essence of true revelation. Revelation is different than healing. I had a revelation when several weeks ago now, and Brian and I were in a really intimate moment and deeply, deeply connected. And inside of this space, it unlocked inside of me that, wow, I open the gates. But he, and in this context of all who are listening, he, capital H, the masculine, brings in the soul. And if we could just sit with that, what that did inside of my being is it actually, and my past is such as my father leaving at 2 years old as a result of suicide, having my best friend's life being taken by a man through a homicide, being, all these we're two of many. We all have examples. We all have a story that precedes this moment. And so, yeah, this was revelation. This was something that in that moment of lived just healed any and all past experience of this lifetime and previous lifetimes and all the timelines. It was a remembering. And in that moment of recognizing, wow, I open the gates, but he brings in life. And without him, conception is not happening. I was weeping, and I was feeling the magnitude of love already for my baby, for my children. And it instantly became this utter worshiping of him. So how could I ever not be in a place and in a position of worshiping that? And how and why would I ever ask, not or stop asking, how can I just love you more all the time? And so may we actually all, as a humanity, as a shared species of procreation, just remember that union, that masculine, feminine wholeness that is absolutely at the basis of every single one of us.
And everyone's birthright is to experience their version of what you just said.
Yeah.
That's, I forgot, 8 billion people, or I think it's 7.8 or some large number, that this is the goal that everyone was given, is that we, by and large, are all fertile.
Mm-hmm.
Or become after our puberty, and then that puberty gives rise to the puberty I would call it a puberty. Your consciousness is becoming flowering, to be aware, way more than animals, let's say, that become fertile by nature as well. Mm-hmm. But we're much more aware of it and can cry tears about how amazing it is, and go like this to the universe. What are we participating in? Yeah. And then the falling in love with the partner, and the incredible mutual, because he's in all of you. Mm-hmm. Without you, what is his point? Right. You know? And so now he has, and it's a circular. It's not just this, it's this.
Right.
And then out of this spinning comes a new little thing that is spun. And then you go, why did that come from? And then that comes out. Now where is it? It's out here. And as you say, deep in the little female baby girl, her micro ovaries at the age of 1 hour or something, old, they're there. But inside of them are the potentials at birth of every ovulation she will ever have. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
In the micro, but they're there in some degree of manifestation. And and the spermato and all these different things. It's mind-boggling. And just to be able to feel the reality to the point of that word, mind-boggling, isn't what I think is what really Tantra, non-duality, is calls enlightenment. Mm. And there's a state of consciousness, not to start up a whole new topic, but this becomes a state of what we tend to call in these times, the state of oneness of consciousness. Mm-hmm. This is not in the popular realm, but that samadhi, or whatever you want to call it, is 100% based in the real textual descriptions, fertility. Mm-hmm. Retas, nirvana, it means the turning into, setting on fire the potential of the millions of generations of fertility, so that the whole fruition of this possibility of fertility is 100% turned into light. Mm-hmm. Only a few incarnations ever do that in any era, like a Christ or a Buddha. And then there's maybe some hundreds of thousands of others that we don't know their names very well. But it's a very specialized, like a queen in a hive. You don't have 1,000 little queens. You have one. Mm-hmm. One, and they feed it to make the body different, and everything goes okay. And that's what that kind of life is about. Mm-hmm. And all the others are the fertility of the awareness that you are feeling now. But man, I will be happy to have somebody take a photo of how you and Brian look after you've been sweating for hopefully only 2 or 3 hours in your maternity mode, and then you're going to be like glistening and beside yourself. You think you look radiant now, you're going to be right. You're going to be like shining, like somebody poured water all over you. You're just glistening. And Brian won't be able to believe that what had happened, that he met you in a coffee shop and now this is happening, you know. And that, of course, is just the beginning.
Yeah.
It's a huge, before and after. So it is a monumental, transformative, episodic time. The cigars or whatever we think of associating with fatherhood or motherhood, and the baby showers, all these kind of things, right? You're living it all out, and it's still only the beginning. And that is in every cell of us. And like you say, even if we don't have children, it's trying, and it reaches out to the human family.
Yes.
And that has been a very big component of human society.
Yes.
It's the people who help all the families that have the raising children and all of that.
Yes.
And they feel, for one reason or another, their partnering never is happening, or by choice. But the main issue is not that they're repressing their sexuality, which we tried to say they're defertilized sexuality. You know, they're blossoming their fertility through all their cells of their body.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, wow, this could go on. And I think you're the only human that I know that we can sit down and have a 4-hour conversation, and it could easily go 4 hours more. So thank you for that. There's a couple of things I want to say just in closing. One is that, well, there's so much more to talk about when it comes to relationships.
Don't forget this.
And we will not forget this. That one's yours. We have this amazing cow. Yes, let's share a piece.
Another chapter.
Wow, that's good. Yeah, there's so many things to say, but I'd like to close on, which will just naturally bring us into what we will do a part 2, because I really want to go into coentheogenesis, but bringing it back to conception and the potential that we have to cultivate, not raise, but cultivate human beings who are just born with this maximum capacity for love intact. I really do believe that it comes down to our capacity to receive. And so thank you, Stuart, for echoing that over and over and over in this lived way, when you were sitting here admiring me and reflecting back the beauty to the degree where you realized, oh, now I have to receive that back. And isn't that magnificent? And doesn't that make us tremble? And so what if all human beings were conceived from that place of trembling, of, oh my God and Goddess, how am I going to receive that magnificent love that is greater than anything or anyone has ever known? May it, may we actually remember what this word overwhelm means. That overwhelm isn't a stressful event. Overwhelm is like the complete overflowing of all our cells and the tears in our eyes. And may we remember that worshiping our partners isn't some kind of repressed shadow that now is being expressed through trying to please the other. That this is really actually our true nature. And if we give ourselves a chance, we can just resurrect all of those things and really, really come alive. Refertilize ourselves, actually. Refertilization.
And it's worth saying that we'll tell the story of Camp David at another time.
Yeah.
But it sounds very local to the person and the couple and so on. But when you articulate this into a global level, you really become capable of talking about world family. And you
Yes.
really become capable of a natural mood of love one another that is a side of an expansion upon the couplehood version. And, since we're in this era right now in 223, this sounds unbelievable, but at Camp David with the Jews and the Arabs or Egyptians solving their war, which is a story we'll talk about later. You can read
Yes.
about it, anybody can, it's well documented. It's like 40 or 5 years into it, peace between Arabs and Jews after like 3,000 years of like war after war after war after war after war. So we know, and it was instigated by looking at their photos of each other's children. They thought they couldn't solve this war problem, and in 2 minutes they started weeping, getting it immediately, the fertility of their babies. And they've got to stop it. It's not like, how do we just got to do it. And how do we got to do it? We just sign the freaking paper. We're the presidents. Yeah. We sign the freaking thing. And because we got the freaking message that you're talking about, only point I'm making is I'm extrapolating.
Yes.
And it may sound as odd, but if Putin and Zelensky woke up like Begin and Sadat, Israeli and Egyptian presidents, with Jimmy Carter guiding, the same thing would happen, because there's no difference between their grandchildren and the Ukrainian Slavic and Russian Slavic children. They're all intermingled. They can't figure out who's who almost, They would break into tears. They would pull the troops back immediately. They would embrace each other like happened at the World War I Christmas truce. Different story. But so just to get a feel that, yes, we're talking local families and communities held together of families of new generations. Your children, let's say there will be in 15 years, they'll be coming into puberty or something, and they're been raised this way, and more children like that in schools and groups, and they meet little boyfriend, little girlfriend, all that. And then at a global level, the presidents, they can't help but realize we're all one family.
Right.
And in that mood, yeah, there's plenty of problems to solve. There's earthquakes everywhere, and droughts and famines and COVIDs. All these things are just can't be done away with, apparently. Lightning happens, and fires, and grain shortage, and criminality, which is a separate topic I know a lot about because I worked in the prisons for 4.5, 5 years. It's another worthy topic, but not right yet. But just in general, yeah, you start to have so much of the reawakening to the fertility that unites us all. Science, genetically, we can only reproduce so far with humans, and so you start to feel what we're shepherding. We're the protectors of the seed of life, as is every species, and they keep doing it. And out of that, war just kind of drops away. Problem solving, yes. Even conflict, misunderstandings. You said this, and then somebody says, oh, you have a difference of opinion. I know how to make those opinions fit back together. You have about property rights or whatever it is, here's how we will. And people get along with little errors that come and go. But because the bulk of it is so prevalent, that how much we are have in common with each other as a family. Well, it brings me a great sense of joy because you will take this further. And it's a mysterious joy. I'm 70, going into my 75th year of life, that a lot of what we're talking about, you will see. And maybe I'll see another 25, I said 30 more years into it, but you're likely to see 75 more years of this. In other words, 40 more years after my eyes close. And the amazing joy of passing on, and you'll do things with it that I've never even thought possible. Like what you say about the shaman traditions. And I'll go, wow, I never thought, wow. And that's what I feel you helped have happen by this simple recording. Good for now?
Good for now.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.